The sound of heels echoed against the marble floors of Zenith Edge Consulting's Lagos headquarters as Amaka Onwudiwe strode toward the boardroom. Heads turned, whispers floated, but Amaka kept her gaze steady. Today was not a day for distractions. Today was the day she would make her pitch to become the next managing director. For over a decade, Amaka had poured her soul into Zenith Edge. She'd worked weekends, flown to client sites last minute, and mentored junior staff while pulling all-nighters. Her late mentor, the outgoing MD, had once told her she was destined for the top. Now, with the position finally open, her dream was within reach. As she entered the boardroom, the atmosphere shifted. Seated at the head of the table was a man she had never seen before, Damilola Adebayo, the newly appointed CEO. Tall, dark-skinned, with the quiet confidence of someone who had seen the world and bent it to his will, Dami's presence was magnetic. He stood up and extended a hand. "Amaka Onwudiwe, I've heard quite a bit about you." She met his gaze firmly. "I hope they told you I'm the one who keeps this company running." A few chuckles broke the tension around the table, but Dami didn't laugh. Instead, he studied her, his expression unreadable. "Let's see what you've got." Amaka launched into her pitch, laying out her vision for Zenith's next 5 years. Expansion into West Africa, tech integration in client operations, and a bold strategy to retain top-tier talent. Every word was precise, confident. She had rehearsed it all week, tweaking data points and reshuffling slides. But when she finished, Dami folded his arms and leaned back. "Impressive," he said, "but aggressive. The board will need reassurance that you're not just chasing ambition, but sustainability." Her brow lifted. "With all due respect, Mr. Adebayo, ambition without sustainability is failure, and I don't fail." He smiled just slightly. "Noted." After the meeting, Amaka returned to her office, her jaw tight with frustration. Who was this man to question her vision? What did he even know about Zenith? He'd been parachuted in from the U.S. with his Ivy League degrees and international awards. But she had bled for this company. Minutes later, her phone buzzed. A message from HR. "Please schedule a one-on-one strategy session with Mr. Adebayo this week." She sighed. It was going to be a long war, but Amaka was ready. If the new CEO thought he could stand between her and the MD seat, he was in for the fight of his life. The following Wednesday, Amaka stepped into the CEO's sleek, minimalist office on the top floor of Zenith Edge. Glass walls offered a sweeping view of Victoria Island's skyline, but Amaka's eyes were focused on one thing. Damilola Adebayo, seated at his desk, sleeves rolled up, reading a document with silent intensity. He didn't look up immediately. "Sit," he said, still flipping through pages. "I've been reviewing your pitch deck." Amaka took a seat, crossing her legs. "And?" He finally looked up. "You're brilliant, no doubt, but you're too used to fighting your way through. I want to understand if you can lead without swinging." She folded her arms. "Is that your way of telling me I'm too aggressive?" "No," Dami replied. "It's my way of saying you don't need to prove anything to me. You've already done that. What I want to see is how you handle being challenged." A pause. Then, with deliberate calm, Amaka said, "I handle challenges by confronting them, with results." Dami leaned forward, clasping his hands on the table. "So show me. Prove to me you can collaborate, not just dominate. Work with me on the new client acquisition strategy. Jointly, we present it to the board in 4 weeks." She raised an eyebrow. "You want us to co-lead a project? You want to be MD, don't you?" "Touché." Amaka stood. "Fine, but don't expect me to nod along if your ideas don't hold water." Dami grinned. "Wouldn't dream of it." The next few weeks were war and wonder. Their working sessions were electric. Ideas clashing, perspectives debated, tensions simmering just below the surface. He was methodical and data-driven. She was instinctive and vision-focused. They argued constantly, but never disrespectfully. And through those long nights and early mornings, something shifted. Amaka began to notice the details. How Dami always listened before responding, how he gave credit freely, how his silence wasn't arrogance, but deep thought. He never called her my dear like the older executives. He called her by her name, always with respect, always with curiosity. One evening, while they reviewed pitch slides at his apartment, his suggestion to avoid distractions, Amaka found herself staring as he poured 2 glasses of wine. "Red or white?" he asked. "Surprise me," she replied, still eyeing the city lights through his balcony. As he handed her a glass, their fingers brushed. She looked up. He didn't pull away. Instead, he said softly, "You're not what I expected." Amaka held his gaze. "Neither are you." The air between them thickened, but she turned back to her laptop. "We should finish the strategy plan." "Yes," Dami said slowly. "We should." But neither of them could focus on the slides after that. By the 3rd week of working together, Amaka and Dami had become a well-oiled machine. Their once tense collaboration had shifted into a rhythm, quick, sharp, seamless. But with that ease came something else, something neither of them dared name. They were laughing more, sending inside jokes through emails, spending longer hours fine-tuning plans that were already perfect, and worst of all, they were beginning to enjoy each other's company too much. Late one Friday, they sat in Dami's office, bathed in the warm glow of the setting sun. Their final strategy presentation was just days away, and they were reviewing the last slide deck. Amaka leaned over his desk, pointing out a small font error, her braids falling over her shoulder. Dami didn't move. He stared at her for a moment too long. "Amaka," he said. She straightened immediately, sensing the shift. "Yes?" "I don't want to make things complicated," he began carefully. "But what we've been building, it feels like more than just work." Her heart stuttered. "Dami," she said, trying to sound firm, "this job means everything to me. If there's even the possibility that people think I'm close to you for the wrong reasons—" "I know," he cut in. "Believe me, I've thought about that every day. But what do we do with this thing between us? Pretend it doesn't exist?" Amaka stood up, pacing near the window. The city below buzzed with its usual Friday chaos, honking cars, neon signs flickering, laughter in the distance. "I've worked too hard to let feelings derail me," she whispered. "I've been overlooked, undermined, underestimated. Being with the CEO, it'll look like I slept my way to the top." Dami stood too, keeping his distance. "Then we don't act on it. Not until the MD appointment is made. Let the work speak for itself." Her eyes met his. There was longing, restraint, and something deeper, respect. "Can you handle that?" she asked. He gave a tight smile. "I can." "Can you?" She nodded slowly. "Then it's a deal." They agreed on a boundary, professionalism, until the board made their decision. But it was a fragile line, trembling beneath the weight of suppressed emotions. That weekend, Amaka went home to her apartment in Lekki, determined to distract herself. She cooked, watched Netflix, even spent Sunday visiting her mother in Surulere. But nothing silenced the memory of Dami's voice. His gaze, the softness that came when he looked at her, like she was more than her resume. She wanted the MD seat. She also wanted a man who finally saw her, not just as a woman but as a leader, a partner, an equal. Was it possible to have both? She wasn't sure, but for now she would fight for her dream. And if love was meant to find her on the battlefield, then so be it. On Monday morning, the office buzzed with fresh energy. Zenith Edge was preparing for its biggest board meeting of the quarter. The entire staff felt the pressure, but none more than Amaka. As she walked into the building dressed in a bold navy blue pantsuit, heads turned, not just for her commanding presence, but for the rumors that had started circling. Whispers followed her. "She and the CEO are awfully close. I heard she's definitely getting the MD role. She's always in his office, sometimes even after hours." Amaka kept her stride strong, her expression unreadable. But inside, her chest tightened. She hadn't done anything wrong. The late-night work sessions, the collaboration, the shared vision, none of it had crossed a line. Yet somehow, just her proximity to Dami was enough to cast a shadow over everything she had built. Later that day, she stood in front of a full conference room, flanked by Dami, ready to present their joint strategy. The board members sat stiffly, some smiling, others unreadable. She began with calm confidence, laying out market research, future projections, and a strong operational plan for West African expansion. When Dami took over, he praised Amaka's foresight and credited her with spearheading the new client retention model. That small public validation made her stiffen, not with pride, but worry. She knew how it would look. After the meeting, as the room emptied, Mrs. Oni, a long-standing board member with a knowing smile, approached Amaka. "You were brilliant," she said. "But my dear, let me give you some advice. Never let a man, no matter how charming, become your shadow at work. It gives people the wrong idea." Amaka forced a polite smile. "Thank you for your concern, Mom, but I've built my reputation on results, not relationships." Mrs. Oni nodded. "Just remember, perception can drown even the strongest swimmer." That evening, Amaka sat in her car in the parking lot, hands on the steering wheel, unsure of what to feel. Frustration, mostly. She had worked harder than anyone. She had delivered, but the mere suggestion of a relationship was threatening to tarnish it all. Her phone buzzed. A message from Dami. "Dinner tonight? Not business, just air." She hesitated, then replied, "Not tonight." She needed space. Space to think. Space to decide if her fight for the MD role was still about power, or if it had become about proving she didn't need a man to succeed, even one she might be falling for. As she drove home in silence, she replayed every glance, every compliment, every late-night joke. Were they reckless, or had they simply become human in a world that punished women for feeling anything at all? One thing was clear. If she was going to win this, it would be on her own terms. She would draw the line sharper, and this time no feelings would blur it. The board's decision was only a week away, and the pressure inside Zenith Edge had reached its boiling point. Amaka buried herself in work, tightening projections, preparing transition plans, coaching department heads. Every moment was an opportunity to remind the executive team who ran this company. But even amid busyness, the silence between her and Dami was deafening. Since she declined his dinner invitation, their interactions had grown distant. No more long conversations. No more casual laughs. Only the occasional email and formal check-ins, stiff with professionalism. It hurt more than she wanted to admit. One evening, while compiling performance reviews, Amaka heard a soft knock on her office door. It was Ngozi, her closest friend at the firm and the head of marketing. She stepped in, closed the door gently, and sat without waiting for an invitation. "You okay?" Ngozi asked, scanning her face. Amaka forced a smile. "I'm fine, just swamped." Ngozi leaned in. "People are talking, loudly, and not in a good way. They think the board will hand you the MD role just to keep Dami happy." Amaka's heart sank. "And you?" she asked quietly. "What do you think?" Ngozi hesitated. "I think you've earned this. But I also think people will weaponize anything to pull a woman down, especially one they can't control." Amaka exhaled, rubbing her temples. "I didn't do anything wrong." "I know, but this is Lagos. Truth doesn't always matter." Later that night, Amaka stayed behind, reviewing client projections when her office door opened again. This time it was Dami. He looked tired, hands in his pockets, no pretense of authority. "I owe you an apology," he said. Amaka didn't look up. "For what?" "For putting you in this position, for letting whatever this is between us affect your credibility." She glanced at him, eyes cool. "You didn't put me anywhere, Dami. I walked into this, with eyes wide open." He stepped closer. "I meant what I said before. I respect you, your work. But more than that," he paused, "I like you, and it's messing with my head." Her chest tightened. "But you're right," he continued. "This isn't the time. You deserve to win without anyone questioning why." Silence. Finally, Amaka stood. "Thank you for saying that." He nodded and turned to leave. But at the door, he added, "If the board makes the wrong decision, I'll fight it. You were born for that seat." And then he was gone. Alone in her office, Amaka stared out at the skyline. The city lights blinked like silent witnesses. She knew what she wanted. She wanted the title, the respect, the legacy. But she also wanted love, the kind that didn't ask her to choose between ambition and affection. She just didn't know if life would let her have both. Not yet. The morning of the board's final decision arrived with the weight of destiny. The entire Zenith Edge building buzzed with silent anticipation. Amaka stood in front of the mirror in the ladies' restroom, smoothing the lapels of her cream blazer. Her reflection stared back, elegant, composed, and unshakable. But beneath that calm exterior, her heart beat a nervous rhythm. She'd done everything right. Everything. She stepped into the boardroom just before 9 a.m., greeted by the steely faces of the directors. Damilola was already seated at the end of the table, his expression neutral. He met her eyes, gave the slightest nod. No words, just quiet solidarity. The meeting began. One by one, the board reviewed her proposal, her leadership record, her contributions over the past 10 years. Mr. Alad, the most senior director, finally cleared his throat. After careful deliberation, he began, we have come to a decision regarding the position of managing director. Amaka held her breath. We believe the company is entering a new era, and we require a leader who understands both its roots and its future. With that in mind, he paused. Too long. We unanimously appoint Amaka Onwudiwe as the next managing director of Zenith Edge Consulting. The room burst into light applause, a few congratulatory smiles. Amaka couldn't move for a second. Then slowly she stood and nodded, lips curved in a gracious, tight smile. Thank you, she said, her voice clear. I won't let you down. Her eyes flicked to Dami. He clapped last, his face unreadable. Back in her office, she shut the door and leaned against it, eyes closed. A flood of emotions surged, relief, pride, exhaustion. She had done it, without compromise, without shortcuts. Her phone buzzed. A text from Dami. Congratulations, Marilyn Onwudiwe. You earned it. Drinks later? She stared at the screen, smiling faintly. Before she could respond, there was a knock. He stood there, no longer the CEO, just the man she'd grown to know, behind the title. May I come in? He asked. She stepped aside. Of course. He walked in, hands behind his back. I have something for you. From behind him, he produced a small, sleek box. Inside it was a custom-made nameplate, Amaka Onwudiwe, managing director. Her throat tightened. You had this made in advance? He shrugged. I had faith. Their eyes met. This time, no walls, no titles, just two people on the other side of a war, bruised but not broken. I still mean what I said, he murmured, about liking you. She held his gaze. And I still mean what I said. I won't let my ambition be confused with emotion. But what if now, he said, stepping closer, they don't have to compete? Amaka didn't respond. Instead, she reached for the nameplate, set it gently on her desk, and then quietly took his hand. 2 weeks after Amaka assumed the role of managing director, the atmosphere in Zenith Edge shifted. Staff greeted her with more respect, department heads leaned on her leadership, and even board members, once skeptical, sought her opinion before major decisions. But the whispers didn't stop. You know she's dating the CEO now, right? They probably planned the whole thing. I heard he gave her that MD role as a wedding gift. Amaka pretended not to hear. She focused on performance metrics, restructuring key departments, and launching Zenith's expansion plan into Ghana. She was determined to prove, again, that her success wasn't borrowed, but earned. Damilola, for his part, kept his distance during work hours. Their relationship, though growing deeper, remained private. At night, he'd show up at her apartment with takeout and wine, or she'd drop by his place with hull of rice and a tired smile. They talked about everything, except the elephant in the office. One Friday evening, they attended a corporate gala together, both invited separately. But as Amaka walked into the grand venue in a deep emerald gown, cameras flashed and conversation stopped. Dami found her at the entrance. His eyes softened. You look like you walked off the cover of Forbes and Vogue combined, he said. She chuckled. And you look like you walked out of a GQ spread. They stood facing each other, tension laced with laughter. But the air changed when one of the board members approached. Good evening, lovebirds, the man said with a smirk. Finally stop pretending, I see. Amaka froze. Dami placed a hand gently at her back. We don't owe anyone an explanation, he said calmly. Amaka's work speaks for itself. The man raised his glass. Just make sure it stays that way. Later that night, back at Dami's apartment, Amaka sat on his balcony, shoes off, staring at the city skyline. I didn't sign up for this level of drama, she muttered. Dami handed her a glass of wine and sat beside her. We can keep hiding, but I don't want to do this halfway anymore. She turned to him. I've spent years fighting to be seen for who I am, not who I'm with. And you are, he said, his voice soft. Even if I wasn't in the picture, you'd still be exactly where you are. Maybe, she whispered, but it's harder when they already assume the worst. He reached for her hand. Then let them talk. And while they do, let's keep building something that shuts them up. She looked at him, really looked. The CEO, the man, the partner. And for the first time, she didn't feel the need to choose between her heart and her ambition. Maybe, just maybe, she could have both. 6 months had passed since Amaka Onwudiwe became managing director of Zenith Edge Consulting. Under her leadership, the company had opened its first West African satellite office in Accra. Client retention numbers had soared. Staff morale had improved. She had launched a mentorship program for young women in corporate spaces, and it was already gaining recognition across the industry. The whispers had died down. Because success silenced noise, and love, when anchored in mutual respect, spoke louder than gossip ever could. On a breezy Saturday morning, Amaka stood on a hilltop in Ikoyi, watching vendors set up for Zenith's annual staff retreat. She wore denim, flats, and a white tee with the words, "She leads, she wins." Dami approached from behind, sliding his arms gently around her waist. You know, he murmured, it's hard to believe the most powerful woman in Lagos still eats roadside boli and fish like it's gold. She grinned. That's because it is gold. They laughed. Their relationship, once hidden in boardroom shadows, now bloomed in the open. They were equals in every way, fierce in their goals, tender in their love. No power games, no fear, just growth. One of the junior staff ran up to Amaka with a clipboard. "Ma, the press is here. They want to interview you and Mr. Adebayo together." She turned to Dami. He raised an eyebrow. "Want to go public?" She shrugged. "We already are. Besides, let's show them what it looks like when love doesn't dim a woman's light, but reflects it brighter." Later that afternoon, under the Lagos sun, the two of them sat for a televised interview. When asked about power dynamics, favoritism, and office politics, Amaka answered with grace. "Yes, we're in a relationship, but before anything romantic happened, we built respect. My position wasn't gifted, it was earned, and frankly, anyone who watched me work would know that." Dami added, "If anything, I had to work twice as hard to earn her trust." The interviewer laughed. The crowd clapped. And somewhere between business questions and soft glances, the world saw not just two executives, but two people who had chosen each other after the battle. That night, Dami cooked dinner. Amaka sat on the kitchen counter, barefoot, sipping Zobo as Afrobeats played low in the background. He turned off the gas, wiped his hands, and stood before her. "Marry me." She blinked. "Is that a proposal or a statement?" "Both," he said, holding up a small velvet box. "I waited until you got your dream. Now I want to build another one, with you." Her smile broke through slowly, then widened. "Yes." No hesitation, no fear, just love.